Okay, so welcome to Talk Through Walls with Walk Through Walls. Gary Sambrook.
Hello, how are you? I'm very good, you?
Fist bump. Normally we just say hello, but today I just thought we should fist bump.
Yeah.
Today's topic is unemployment and various spin-off topics that may result from discussing unemployment. On your marks, get set, go.
So this is one of those things, isn't it? Because you get monthly jobs figures, it always leads the news. This time of year particularly, it gets a lot of headlines because slow news over the summer, etc. And it's the sort of thing which worries people. It's when they pick up the newspaper or they look at their online news and they see unemployment is this much, or jobs figures are coming down or they're going up, and it sets a temperature and a tone, doesn't it? And that's how business has an outlook. So these things are really important, and it's incredibly important for businesses to monitor them, to look at them, to see what the trends and the trajectory are doing, but then also look at the weak points and where the opportunities are, because in all bad news headlines, there's always something you can think about and go, you know what, this is what we might be able to do differently, and also be able to try and influence, because this also drives a lot of the political agenda too. So it is incredibly important, and the figures aren't good. The government have got to be looking at these and be wondering what can they do differently. And we always say in the world of public affairs, which I work in, is change is good for business, because people want to know what's going on, they want to be able to engage with what's going on, and they want to be able to try and influence what's going on. So this is incredibly important. It's a really important thing to try and monitor. And as I said, if you were a business setting up now in the UK, there are so many hurdles that you have to try and overcome, from tax, regulation, to trying to find a niche in an area when you're doing your business development. It's all this stuff plays on your mind, how you're going to grow and expand and employ more people to make a profitable company. But those things, the problem is at the moment the political dialogue seems to be that profit is a bad thing, but in the reality is that underneath all that is a whole group of people who are employed and are contributing to the state and to general society, and that's incredibly important. And you look at some of these job figures and look at the number of people who aren't economically active, it is quite worrying, and you've got to look at how you try and engage to try and get those people into work. And many of them will have varied reasons as to why they're not in work. Some of it's intergenerational, some of it is new. There's a lot of challenges post-COVID world, especially with a big emphasis on mental health is a big pull factor into economic inactivity, and that's something that the government's going to be looking at, and that's something that the businesses are going to be looking at their workforce to see what they can do differently. And we've seen a complete change in the way in which people work, whether it's working from home, which a lot of companies now do permanently. A lot of them are now pushing back into having more people in the office on a more regular basis. So all those sort of things are consideration, which ultimately give us these monthly figures, which we can then have a look at and sort of dissect.
Speaking of figures, let me hit you with a few. So, and I've got my little pad here. I'm not quite clever enough to retain all of these with total accuracy.
You used to tut at people in Parliament when you did that. Tut.
But the current unemployment rate is 4.7%. It's as high as it's been today since the beginning of 2021, so COVID times. That equates to 1.67 million people out of a total workforce in Britain of 35.8 million people. So your 4.7% is your 1.67 million. Right now, across the UK, according to official figures, there's 750,000 jobs available, so jobs that are not yet filled, 750,000. Another interesting stat out there circulating at the moment is that analysts reckon that there would be 250,000, so that's 250,000 jobs in the economy additional to what we've got now, had Rachel Reeves in the autumn not put in her autumn statement this massive hike on national insurance. So effectively creating a penalty for job creation, which hit small and medium-sized businesses harder than anyone. So they came into power, they're saying they're pro-business, pro-this, pro-that, we're pro-growth, really want to drive the economy forward. Then she brought in this big penalty on jobs, essentially. So right now, had she not done that, had she even lowered national insurance, which is another thing that Donald Trump was talking about the other day when he was schooling Starmer on his Turnberry golf course. He was saying, what you should do, you should lower taxes. Well, effectively, the Labour government have done the opposite, and as a result, there is 250,000 fewer jobs in this economy than there would otherwise have been, which is quite a stark statistic. And there are some others here that I've got. What's worth talking about? So you've got 9.1 economically inactive people in the economy right now. That includes pensioners, that includes students, but quite importantly, and referencing one of the things you mentioned, 2.8 million of that 9.1 million, so that's nearly 3 million people right now, are working age people that could be in work, but for various reasons are not in work because of health concerns, health issues, notably mental health. So that's a massive thing. I don't think we can talk about unemployment in Britain at the moment without touching on that at some point during this discussion. So anyway, there are your stats. 4.7% unemployment rate, the highest it's been since the start of 2021. Gary Sandbrook, if you were in power, what would you be doing to sort this out?
Yeah, well, the one thing that always, in my political life, and then also the work I did before then, that you always get from business, and it is important, but I think it's a slight sort of deflection. The business always say, what we need from government is certainty. We want certainty for long-term planning. We had lots of political uncertainty for a long period of time, and now we have certainty. But the reality is that a lot of people don't like that certainty and they want to try and change it. Now, you get a lot of government schemes. There is always a new scheme in employability which comes along. You have Restart, which we know from one of the organisations that we work with, SPR, Starting Point Recruitment, who do a lot of work in that space of Restart, getting people off benefits into work, to have that dignity of work and routine and getting into the workplace and earning money. Now, we know from them that there is certainty in that space, but government are saying that they're going to change it at some point. So that's sort of, everyone's sort of hanging around, looking at what it is, what's going to happen, where it's going to change in the future, what it's going to mean. There'll be consultations, it will be a long process, but it'll be something which will be phased in over time, but that's not going to solve things now. And that system's got to stay, it's got to work well, and companies have got to try and engage in it. Because if you don't engage with these programs, then you can't say, you can't really moan. It's like voting, and sorry, it's not voting and then moaning, isn't it, really? Yeah. So you've got to engage, you've got to be participating, you've got to be raising your voice to be able to, for your organisation to be heard. Now, mental health is, going to your earlier point, is a very complex topic because it can become in many different shapes and forms, just like physical health. And so we've had now for a number of years parity of mental health with physical health in recognition with the health service. Now we're slipping over more into the work world, and that is becoming more of a bigger balance to try and fill. For years there were government programs on access to work, which would mean that you would, your company could buy monitors for you and tables which come up and down and special seats and that sort of stuff to help people with back pain. That sort of stuff has now got to properly roll over into the mental health world to try and balance what the pressures are that people have in their home life or their work life, to be able to help them get into work. Because my personal opinion is that there is nothing better than the dignity of work, the dignity and the knowledge of a routine, going out in the morning, getting up, ironing your shirt, getting in the shower, going out to work, etc. That is good for us as structure. But then government has got to try and package that into some kind of program which business can buy into to be able to get people into work.
Yeah, I mean, I've spoken to a lot of the people who work at Starting Point Recruitment, and the people that sort of triage job applicants who are coming to the company and saying, look, I'm available, I'm out of work, these are my skills, and they're having that initial conversation. A lot of them speak of being very, very down, and of course so back in the old days it'd be, I'm sort of down because I've not got work. They wouldn't, people in the old days wouldn't then use mental health, but it's bracketed under mental health. Yes. People talk about, I've got poor mental health, and actually a caveat here, anything you and I say that may sound flippant about this is not because we're intending to be, it's because we're not experts in mental health. We're not psychiatrists or psychologists or anything like that. But what we hear from colleagues at SPR is, look, the people that come in have had a period of time out of work. It's made them feel down, which is only to be expected.
But it's a product as well in many ways of COVID.
Yeah.
You've got a COVID generation of school leavers now coming through who are going into the workplace. And
Lack
there
of
was a
social
lot-
interaction.
Social interaction, that social isolation.
Yeah.
As where having a conversation with someone who's more senior in an organisation, people your own age. That sort of thing that you learn at school and you learn by doing, right, was unfortunately for a whole generation of people stripped away. And then there's other people who are a bit older who for that entire period were working from home and got out the habit of that socialisation. And so it's trying to rehabilitate people back into the workplace. Even simple things just like getting on the bus in the morning or on a train where you're surrounded by people. Some people do find very difficult. And that social isolation which happened is we've got to try and get back into that routine again.
It feels to me a bit like it's almost self-perpetuating this. You've got 2.8 million people who are able to work but don't work currently because of health issues, notably mental health issues. But for each day that passes where they're not working, many of those people, that problem will in their minds get worse and worse because they're not working, they're not active. But that being active, that getting back into it, into the swing of things, like all the things you've just described, social interaction, having a purpose, that actually is probably one of the best cures. It's like, wait a minute, I'm not going to think about myself and how bad things are for me. I've got a purpose now. There's a bigger picture. And actually, I think not with this is a sort of side topic, I guess. I think that's a great reason for people to get involved with like voluntary work and stuff, and a lot of people do. You're taking the focus off you and onto someone else. But anyway,
But what would be interesting in this space, and maybe this is a topic for another day, is trying to have a look at the comparators in other similar economies as well around the world. Do they have a similar issue with people with mental health problems not engaging in the work process? And is it because our system is designed in a particular way, which has meant that it's easier to claim out of work benefits in order to look after yourself on mental health, or do other economies and other governments incentivise it in another way? So to have a look at those figures and do comparisons with like-minded economies would be an interesting way. And then from that you can then design programs which help the individual and also help businesses make sure that there's a more and more synergy in those programs.
Let me chuck some more stats at you. So total welfare bill for Britain annually, £303 billion. Now that includes pensions. So we strip the pensions away and we've got a disability benefit bill annually, 90 billion. And working age benefits, so different tranche of benefits, 117 billion. So you're looking there more or less 210 billion pounds a year. GDP for this country is 2.8 trillion. So those are big numbers, kind of lofty figures, but that's a chunk of change spent on disability benefits and working age benefits. I'm stating the obvious here, but for every person that leaves the unemployment bracket and goes across into having a job, you've got someone who's contributing to the tax purse, all those good things, and is not drawing on this disability cost. So clearly there's a very, very clear incentive for everyone to help solve this problem. But I think the organisation with the most influence over it is government, and right now it seems to me that yes, they're coming out with, the latest thing is there's a white paper on getting Britain working again. It's all the right messages, but I think apart from the messages, it's not very clear how that's going to help. I know Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer have done U-turns on various things, or semi-U-turns. What do you think the chances are of them doing a U-turn on the real lever that's going to solve this problem, which to me, in my simplistic view of things, seems to be national insurance? They've hiked it up. Why not just concede that this is not helping? It's actually making a bad problem worse. what are the chances of them doing a U-turn on it?
Well, I mean, it depends, because there's lots of different things to unpack in there. One of them, if you look at it from UK PLC point of view, that you look at that percentage to GDP of spending on welfare. And there's like, with what we're seeing at the moment, if you believe the reports in the media, but also the stats, is we're seeing a massive flight of wealth from the UK into other parts of the world. Now, the more wealth that leaves, the bigger that ratio is of the wealth budget on GDP. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger, which makes it more of a headache for government to be able to try and square that circle of how it becomes
So
affordable.
what you're talking about is I don't know how many thousand millionaires who've left, but those kinds of people are the business owners, the wealth creators, the job creators.
Yeah, they're the ones that help top up the government account to be able to spend things, which is a luxury in the world. If you look at the world in the context of that welfare system, we believe passionately as a UK in the welfare system, helping the poorest people, whether they can work or whether they can't work, to make sure there's that safety net. But that safety net becomes more and more expensive with the more people that are leaving the UK who aren't topping up the UK bank account. Now that makes it unsustainable on the current footing, so they're going to have to do something at some point. Now, the short term is to plug the gap. Is the NI contributions going up? Are they going to do more of that on tax, wealth tax, etc., to try and plug that short term gap? Or are they going to look at it from a more, what I would consider a longer term view, as saying that if you do U-turn on NI, if you do look at the tax environment and the business environment for growth and say, well, actually, if we do this and this, then that will encourage growth, then that will obviously pay for the privileges that we have in this country, i.e. things like welfare, which will help balance those books. At the moment, the government seems to be very hell-bent on its mission for growth, but from a regulatory point of view. So they want to reform planning and the regulation. You said when we spoke about water last week, of merging those quangos. Their mission for growth does very much look at the role in which the state plays in the regulation and the enforcement and the barriers in place for companies to grow. I would argue that you have to do both. I agree with them completely, to be fair, that there is a lot of regulation in the way of business, those quangos, the regulations and planning, etc., which do hold back growth. But at the same time, companies are going to have money to invest to be able to reap the benefits of that lack of regulation as well. So it's a bit of a mixed bag.
And these companies will, especially the ones with the ability not to necessarily have to be based in Britain, will be looking around thinking, well, what's the best regulatory and tax and political environment for me.
It's easier now than ever to move your money around, to move yourself around. The world is a global place, whether we like it or not. And you know, it is easy to up sticks and move to Milan or move to Ireland or move wherever you like. A lot of places have got much more favourable tax regimes for individuals and for businesses, and you're seeing that they're doing it in great numbers. You see when you look at the tax receipts which are coming through at the moment, which are published I think quarterly or monthly for government, but these things are making a real dent in the money that the government is collecting, which is why debt is going up and why borrowing is going up. Now at some point all of this will come together in a perfect storm, and whether that creates the political conditions to be able to make a U-turn offering, we're still yet to see. I don't think we're at that space yet. It doesn't look like we're at that space yet.
Let me come at you with, I'm not sure if you did answer my question on whether you think the government will...
I'm a former politician, of course I never answered.
Well, exactly, and I was going to mention that, but I've obviously far too polite. But it's true. So the question was, do you think the government will do a U-turn on its national insurance policy? And then coupled with that, I think as well as doing that, what other assurances do you think the government can give business to continue investing in this country and doing their thing in this country? And then the other thing that I'd attach onto that question is there any point lobbying government to change this?
So I think at the moment, no, they're not going to change course because they don't need to. The political storm is difficult for them, but it's not the perfect storm for changing or U-turning at the moment because they've only been in for a year. Yes, it's been a difficult year for them, but I think more water's got to run under the bridge. They're wedded to an idea, that sort of regulatory approach to growth, for scaling it back. So I think they want us to try and see whether that works. A lot of that is still going through Parliament. So you've, especially on the employment bill, and also planning reform changes. A lot of that is still coming through. It hasn't quite been fully implemented.
So given all of that, I'm feeling depressed just as you list all the things. Is there any point lobbying government to change it? Given that they're so ideologically wedded to this course, is there any point trying to persuade them otherwise?
There is, and I'm sure we've spoken about it before, but a couple of weeks ago when there was that big rebellion on welfare, and that was because all those Labour MPs, as big as their majority was, go back home, go back to their constituencies, they socialise with friends and family, they go out, they have to talk to their local political parties, they go to community groups. All of those things generate a huge amount of conversation, interest and lobbying and stakeholder management, which when you're doing lobbying properly and public affairs properly and look at it from a bigger picture, not just the individual, but look at their sphere of influence, which will come on in a minute from another topic about the Revolut stuff which is happening at the moment, is that all of that does make a huge amount of value to lobbying government, because it's about the individuals. Every one of those MPs has a phone call with their whip every week, right, telling them what's wrong, what's going on, and it's all good, valuable stuff, which helps generate a trend, a trajectory, a theme, which is going through Parliament, and then at some point, when things that may or may not work. I mean, I don't happen to think that it will work. I don't think you think that the way in which they're doing it at the moment will work, but it might do. We might be proven wrong. Now, at the point that they choose to decide whether it is working or not, all that noise which is carrying on through at the moment, which can come from business, can come from lobbying, will make a big impact at the point when it doesn't work, if it doesn't work.
And it's interesting you say that about the noise, and I guess you could simplify that to what the people are saying, what the electorate are saying, who's griping about what, and no one summed it up better than a fellow we spoke about a few weeks ago, Donald Trump, in his chats at Turnberry Golf Course. He basically said, look, the way you win an election is you lower taxes, unlike the Labour government. You lower taxes, you secure the border, and you take a tough stance on crime, and also you promote freedom of speech and you protect freedoms of speech. Now, on every single one of those four things, Keir Starmer, whilst he was nodding and going, oh yes, they're great, he's actually, you could argue, his government is doing things to undermine every single one of those four things, which leads me neatly on to mentioning the Online Safety Act. That is, on the one hand, yes, it's a very good thing. We don't want kids stumbling across harmful things online, but actually there's a very, very sinister surveillance state aspect to that, which will have a big impact on business too. So businesses of all shapes and sizes are going to have to start putting disclaimers on their thing to say, this could be harmful potentially to someone who's all risk, if they're penalised by whatever regulator it will be that will police that bill once it's in effect, all risk 18 million fines of 18 million or 10% of global turnover, whatever's the greater. I mean, that's scary stuff for a lot of businesses.
Absolutely, it is, and I mean, I've been watching the implementation of the Online Safety Bill with a lot of interest, because obviously that was a piece of legislation which came through when I was in Parliament.
Did you vote for it?
I voted for it, and over the last week I've been watching it wondering how on earth I did, because I remember at the time lots of these conversations happening about what would happen during the implementation, and there were so many assurances and examples about how none of this would happen. It wouldn't be as intrusive as it has turned out to be. Right, and I look back now and think, how on earth have we allowed this to happen? And it is, like you say, it's incredibly important that young people are protected online. It's a dangerous space, but the problem is it's a global space too, and it is so easy to try and sidestep around a lot of these sort of regulations, and it makes the regulations virtually pointless. And so what you end up doing is that the good people who use things responsibly end up being punished for that of the bad people that do try and commit harm online, but they're still doing it anyway because they have the know-how of how to bypass it. So for me, it is a bit like a sledgehammer to crack a nut sort of situation. And I don't know how you try, I mean, without completely revoking it, repealing it, which I don't think is going to happen. This government doesn't have any.
Well, there's a petition with, I don't know, anywhere up to 300,000 names on it to do that.
I think you can probably tell by the way in which the Secretary of State Peter Carler's approach to Nigel Farage's criticism of it by linking him to Jimmy Savile, but this government probably doesn't have an appetite for repeal or doing anything which would make it easier for good, honest, working, decent people to use the internet in a much restrictive and intrusive way, right? But I think that a lot of this has got to come through education of arming people with the know-how of how to be safe online, not government imposing regulation and so intrusively to do it. But this has big impacts for businesses too, because now businesses are going to have to look at content, to user-generated content, whether it's malicious, where it's coming from, age verification. All of this has got huge ramifications, not just on individuals, but also on businesses too. And this is just yet another example of where if you want to set up a business, if you're trying to invest a bit of your money to grow a business, to try and create jobs, it's another intrusion, it's another barrier in the way for people trying to create that growth and wealth, which the UK is so well known for over centuries of being a world leader in a lot of industries.
So we could just spend the next hour raging about the Online Safety Act. However, that's well summarised. And the other thing we were going to mention is Revolut. So Revolut did some great lobbying. I asked you before, is there any point lobbying government? Well, actually, Revolut's an example where, there is. So they obviously have a very good public affairs team, and they're doing lots of good work. They'd do even better if they had walk through walls. That goes without saying. But they managed to get the ear of the Chancellor, and the Chancellor was all ready to have a meeting with, I think it was her and the Bank of England, or maybe I think I'm right. But then the Governor of the Bank of England said no from a regulatory and
completely kiboshed at them. This is where I think obviously the lovely sales pitch for Walk Through Walls, but this is I think where we do things a bit differently, and maybe that's because many of us have been involved in the processes before, is that we look at things from a more holistic 360 viewpoint. As of course you have a person like Rachel Reeves, who is the ultimate decision maker. She's the one with the pen in her hand to sign off legislation, and to enforce regulations, etc., which then go into Parliament for debate and voting on, right? But ultimately, all of these people have got spheres of influence around them. You have to look at it 360. And it's like, where are her influences from? What's her past or her work? Who is she associated with? What trade unions is she most close to? What think tanks is she most close to? The network of friends that she keeps, and what industries they're in, etc. All of this is incredibly useful and powerful of how to influence people from a public affairs point of view. But then equally, many people also forget the regulators around them as well. These are huge organisations which have so much influence over our day-to-day lives, but we have to take them into consideration when doing that work too, to look at the bigger picture, to look at the whole of it in that 360 view. So yes, engage with the Chancellor, but this is a great example of where you've got to be engaging with the regulator too, to be able to get your message across in order to successfully.
But it's a really depressing example as well, because other people within the banking financial services sector, and probably a load of other sectors as well, will see that news. It'll be in all the business sections of all the major papers around the world, and they'll go, oh my goodness, Britain is not a business-friendly place. Even when you get to the top, the second most important politician in the land, there's still a chance that some regulator, some civil servant, or they're not civil servants, but you know what I mean, could come in and kibosh it, which is really, again, another thing to add to the list of business unfriendly
but it's
things in the UK.
For all of us, politics aside, and everyone will have their own individual views, I think that most people believe in UK PLC. They believe in their country, and they want their country to do well. And for businesses around the world, we're picking up the FT or any other paper and feel dispirited by regulators like that and think that this isn't a place to do business, that is bad news for all of us. And what we've got to try and do is help create a space where it is more friendly, business friendly, is more open to the world, because unfortunately these days it's just too easy to move things somewhere else. And if those big businesses around the world are just going, well, why bother? Let's go somewhere else. Let's go to Italy. Let's go to America and look further afield. That is not good for us as a country. And so it's all part of our job to be able to help raise the noise, raise the concerns, raise the awareness of what is actually like in the day-to-day life in business, to help try and change and influence the direction that we're on at the moment.
So to wrap up, we started this conversation about unemployment. There's a lot of people out of work in this country at the moment, best part of 1.7 million people looking for jobs. There's at least 750,000 jobs in Britain right now, job vacancies. In this city alone, Birmingham, there is 80,000 job vacancies right now. And next week, next Wednesday, there's a jobs fair being run by Starting Point Recruitment, the company we mentioned earlier, and also they're partnering with the Department for Work and Pensions, DWP. So Starting Point Recruit, SPR, are joining forces with government to put on a jobs fair, which we hope to get about 1,500 people to, or SPR do. That is something where we can chip away at those overall.
It's a positive contribution
numbers.
to trying to bridge that gap.
Yeah. So if you're out of work, looking for something,
Get down to
go
Millennium
along.
Point.
Yeah, it's 10 a.m. Millennium Point next Wednesday, middle of Birmingham, and people would love to talk to you. And I think one of the things about SPR that I appreciate, which is different from other recruitment agencies, is that they look at the person, not the CV. They don't just look at the CV and go, well, you haven't got the right qualifications and experience, you're in the bin. They talk and assess the actual person, which I know a lot of the people who have gone through that process speak of that and say that was very different, and that's the difference between them staying on the unemployed list and now being in work, which is bound to be a positive.
Absolutely, yeah. Great, so I think we're doing a good summary there of what's wrong with the world. We just haven't come up with many solutions.
No, we've assessed it. One final question actually is, you pride yourself in your trousers, but today
You've out-trousered me. However, I am quietly conservative and you are loudly eccentric.
Yeah.
So that I think I'm actually jealous of your eccentricity today.
It's all about the trouser game. Basically, that's what it boils down to. Anyway, that has been, don't know which camera to look at, that has been Talk Through Walls with
Walk Through Walls.
See you next time.
There we go.